It's quite an overcast day, but let's see what kind of images I can pull out today, since I'm currently heading down into the city with my Osmo 3. I want to take some images for my next Osmo 3 videos. Might be already been published until this point, but I'm quite excited right now to head down into the city, because as you might already notice by the title, I'm finally will be able to hold the Nikon ZF, the retro style DSLR from Nikon back then, in my hands. And thanks to my friends at Fotoprofi in Sling, I will be able to borrow that camera for a few days, make my own first impression, and let's see how it will feel like. Quite excited about this. Thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Phil, aka Phil, and I have a huge sweet spot for retro style cameras, as many of you who have followed this channel quite some time right now, and therefore, yeah, really excited about this Nikon ZF. Here we are. Let's go in. Alright, I was at the camera store, as you might have seen, and look, it's here finally in my hands, the Nikon ZF. And I just paired it with the 50mm 1.8 pancake lens from the film days, and yeah, looks quite amazing, right? But I did one stupid mistake. I didn't bring an extra SD card to shoot this camera right away. So yeah, I have to wait for another day when I have a free time slot. For you it will be only a cut, but for me it's kind of a bummer. I didn't bring an extra SD card. But yeah, up for the next day. Alright, new day, new luck. I charged every battery of the Nikon ZF, also put in a SD card, so now I'm heading out again and try to get some footage, some images with the Nikon ZF. Let's collect some experience with this awesome DSLR retro style camera. Also, besides of the 50mm, I also bring with me the 28mm 2.8, also the vintage line. So let's see what I can get today with this combo, and I have to say this feels very great in the hands, but I already have too many cameras. Yeah, I was finally able to take this baby out for a quick shoot, and unfortunately I didn't have much luck regarding the weather. It started to rain when I started my short little session with the Nikon ZF, but since this is a loan from Fotoprofi Sling, thanks a lot guys again for this opportunity. Links below to Fotoprofi if you're interested. Yeah, again, since this was a loan, I was hesitant to put this camera out in the rain, so I basically packed it up when the rain got heavier. But nevertheless, I was still able to collect a little bit of experience with the Nikon ZF compared with, you could say, this is a father-son combo, Nikon ZF being the father, Nikon ZF, my most used camera in the past few years. It was quite interesting to have some similarities between these two cameras, this being a DSLR camera, a retro style Ling, and this being a mirrorless camera, having retro style of the Nikon ZF, but also inspired by the Nikon FM2. So if you would hold it that way, that would be the grandfather, Nikon FM2, ZF being the father, and the ZF being the son. Interesting combo, right? I'm putting it down because I think some will have anxiety. I drop everything. And I just want to basically share my experience with the Nikon ZF because I don't own it. But again, I just want to draw some similarities to the ZF, which I highly appreciate. And first of all, what I noticed right from the beginning is the ergonomics, and the ergonomics of this Nikon ZF is very nice. You have here a nice grip. It's not that deep compared to the D700, the classic DSLR camera, but it's enough to have it comfortable in the hands. And also you have here a place to rest your thumb with a nice leather pattern. Both of that also just makes it very nice to hold this camera. Very comfortable, especially compared to the Nikon ZF. Regarding this ergonomics, I made a lot of comments about that already. And that was a pleasant surprise, that this camera really feels nicely in the hands. Also, because the Nikon ZF is a DSLR camera, I expected to be it much more heavier, especially because of my experience with the D700, also the D200, and lately I also acquired this D80. Yeah, now I have a lot of Nikon cameras, sue me for that. But because of the experience I had with the classic DSLRs from Nikon, I expected this one to be quite heavy, being a retro style camera also. But I think it also only weighs around 650, 700 grams. I will blend it to you up here. And this is quite an uncomfortable weight because that's the same weight like the Nikon ZF, or here the Nikon Z6 I. So relatively comfortable to hold for a full frame camera. Also, if you pair it with an autofocus lens like this 51.8, or what I did for my street shoots, one of these film glass lenses, the balance of the camera feels quite nice in the hands, and especially with the pancake lens, which is currently mounted on the D200, the camera feels quite relatively lightweight for a DSLR especially. So that surprised me regarding ergonomics and also the weight carrying this camera for that quick session. Next of all is, of course, being a retro style camera is in the Nikon design language also because of the dials. And here, of course, you see where the ZF has the dial language, you could say. The shutter speed dial, funny enough, it feels basically the same regarding quality. The clicks is a little bit from the sound differently, but from the tactile feels for me the same. So also on high quality dials on the DF. Here you have your shutter speed dial, and here also the ISO dial, which has been changed a little bit compared to the ZF regarding design. But already on the DF you had very high quality tactile dials to cover that experience of retro style cameras. Because this Nikon ZF is an F-mount camera, you can mount, as I mentioned, vintage glass, which I did because all these old Nikon F lenses from the past have an aperture ring. You have here basically the exposure triangle in one triangle. You have your aperture ring here up here, you have your shutter speed and also your ISO. That's something I'm still wishing for the Nikon ZF. I know that I think TT Artisan and some other third-party manufacturers, Viltrox also one of them, have lenses with aperture rings for the Z mount, but I'm still waiting for a solution from Nikon themselves to have a native supported lens with aperture ring. Let's see if that will ever come up. But yeah, I digressed. Back to the DF. What I also noticed regarding details, which is quite nice, is this little window. Hopefully the camera can focus. I have currently an 32 GB old SD card in this camera, and you can see here, although the camera is off, you can see the amounts left, how many shots you are able to take with the left space on the memory card. That's a quite nice detail. If you turn on the camera, you can also see your f-stop and your shutter speed on this display. This small display has also made its way to the Nikon ZF, but unfortunately here you only have your f-stop. So I like the small detail on this small window. It's a minor detail, but I was quite surprised that this DF has it. You also have your battery status on this display. Yeah, shooting this camera, besides of the retro style Sling, is basically like a DSLR. Of course, you have an OVF on top, since it is a DSLR, and you can just shoot like every other DSLR back then. And of course, you have here also the loud shutter sound. Just comparing this with the D700, just for funsies, D200, D80, and again the DF, and now the ZF. And now the real OG shutter speed sound. I have to say, because of the loud shutter sound, shooting a DSLR on the streets, I do have my anxiety, because I have the fear that at any moment, as soon as I press this shutter and pointing the camera at someone, that I get called out. That's why I don't enjoy using a DSLR on the streets, to be honest, since I want to take images of people when I have the chance. But besides that factor, during that session, I really enjoyed using this DF. And it is, first of all, because it's a retro style camera. As many of you know, I have a sweet spot for these kinds of cameras, but also a retro style camera in the body of a DSLR gives it basically double retro style vibes, because nowadays you barely have OVFs, mainly on the Leica rangefinders if you want to buy a new camera. And that experience is, you could say, relatively unique. You can only find this in a body like the Nikon DF. And for that, I really enjoyed my quick session with this camera. Also, having my film glass, my vintage glass, mounted on a Nikon camera without an adapter. That's also possible on the ZF or the Z6, but you require that F to Z adapter, which is quite thick. And if you mount that on the modern mirrorless cameras, it just looks ugly from the outside. Here on an F mount body, you can just attach it directly and you don't have any adapter in between. And that's also, I found some joy out of that this lens combination just fits perfectly with the Nikon DF. What surprised me when I opened up the camera was that this DSLR, Nikon DSLR, uses a different battery. This is the battery which the Nikon DF uses. And the reason why I'm surprised is that if you compare it with all the other DSLRs I have right now on the table, you have this kind of battery, which is, you could say it's almost double in capacity, or almost, not sure. But putting the size away, regarding the battery of the DF, the battery life was amazing, since this is a DSLR, and therefore there's no issue if there's a camera having a small battery. Also, my buddy Jack owns this Nikon DF model, and he didn't have any issues regarding battery life on this camera.
Here is my Nikon DF. When I started shooting with my Nikon DF, I was shocked at how good the battery life was. We said DSLRs are cheap, but this is probably the least value for money DSLR on the market right now. This battery is the one that shipped with the camera. 10-year-old battery.
Nice.
Do I need to buy a second one? And I was like, oh, surely it's going to die. But I've been using this same battery the whole time I bought it, and it lasts me like 3 days. And I shoot relatively high volumes for street photography.
What's also nice from the Nikon DF being on a DSLR being released in 2013, I think. At that time, cameras started to have SD cards. Therefore, you can just use your regular SD cards. For this DSLR, I'm mentioning that because all the older DSLRs from Nikon or Canon they use the compact flash camera cards, which you can still buy today. Here you have an extra hassle to get a card reader if you don't have one. And if you want to buy into an old DSLR, you have to buy these kinds of memory cards. Also, this is a compact flash one. And fortunately, this Nikon ZF just uses regular SD cards. Spec-wise, you can say regarding a modern view, this camera doesn't excite as much. I think the sensor has 17 megapixels, provides one SD card slot. But nevertheless, this camera does produce amazing images. In my opinion, I'm fine with 17 megapixels. I'm in the ballpark between 20 and 13 megapixels, where these kinds of megapixel counts is enough for my personal use. I also experience lower megapixel cameras like the D700 or here the D200, and even below 17 I'm in most cases fine, depending on the scenario, of course, and your use case. But that's basically just my first impression, you could say, regarding the Nikon ZF. Having this finally in comparison next to the ZF was quite fun. My conclusion for after this experience is that if Nikon will produce a ZF Mark II at some time in the future, that they adapt this grip on the ZF body. And I'm still hoping for this year that they at least release one lens in this SE retro style design for either the 50-1.4 lens or the 35-1.4 lens. Hopefully both. I'm still hoping for that. But yeah, that's also one point which I really enjoyed, having this vintage type glass directly on the DF, and it was very fun to shoot with. Price-wise, I have to say that this DF kind of holds its value, depending on your country, between $1,000 and $1,500. This one is priced around $1,000 at Photoprofi. And I have to say that this camera was a little bit ahead of its time. Imagine that Nikon would have released something like this during the pandemic. I think they would have sell this kind of camera like hotcakes. But of course, technology advances, and in that period Nikon has their Z mount to establish. But yes, it's always difficult to time or predict any kind of trends. Nobody would have expected that something like the X100 lineup would get such a boom that Fujifilm is not able to provide any cameras during the pandemic, for example. And therefore, in my opinion, the Nikon ZF was a little bit ahead of its time. A DSLR in a retro style body. Unfortunately, back then there was not that kind of demand for that. Also, I think people were not in that mindset of asking for vintage stuff in general. Nowadays, that's a totally different ballgame, not only in the camera space, but also in interior, music with vinyls, and so on. But yeah, that's basically my experience I wanted to share with you. Again, thanks a lot to Photoprofi Sling for loaning me this camera for a few days just to experience the OG Nikon ZF, which led to the Nikon ZF. If you're in Germany and need some stuff regarding cameras, just reach out to them and check their website. I will leave them down in the description. Nothing is sponsored here. I wish I was, and that's also the case for here. If you want to know a little bit more details, watch videos about the Nikon ZF, check out my buddy Jack. I will leave you several videos down in the description below. He owns the Nikon ZF and also appreciate this camera very much. It basically motivated him to collect more f-glass lenses to use it directly on the Nikon DSLR body, because as I mentioned on the mirrorless, you have to adapt that ugly adapter. And yeah, check him out. I will leave the links below. That's all for today. If you're still here watching, thank you very much for your time. You are the one who deserves the like for that. If you want to support my small little channel, check the affiliate links below in the description. And if you want to find out what weird things I found between the Nikon ZF and the OM3, just click on this video and have a nice day.